The sky above the salvage zone never changed. It stayed heavy and gray, as if the clouds themselves had given up long ago. The ground was a sea of broken machines, rusted metal, scorched armor plating, and shattered glass. This was the world Rain walked through every day with a bag over his shoulder and a scanner in his hand. His job was simple: pick through the ruins, salvage anything valuable, sell what you could, forget what you couldn't. Rain had been living here since he was 16. No family, no home. Just a small shelter built from broken ship hulls and old drone parts. Most days were quiet. Boring, dangerous sometimes. Once he saw a man lose half his leg to an old sentry mine buried beneath a cargo crate. But Rain was careful. He moved slow and watched for signs of movement, heat, or energy. That's why he noticed it. That strange sound. He was deep in the southern sector where the war machines were piled the highest. Giants of steel melted together. In the firestorms of the old war, the scanner beeped weakly, picking up faint signals, but nothing worth digging for. Rain was about to turn back when he heard it, a soft whimper, like a child crying through clenched teeth. He froze. The sound came again from beneath a slab of bent armor, almost buried under wires and ash. Ryan dropped his bag and pulled off a loose panel, then another. The sound grew louder. Not human exactly, but close, high-pitched and full of pain. He grabbed a metal rod and pried open the last piece, and what he saw made him stumble backward. There, curled up between two scorched power cells, was a girl, or something like a girl. Her skin shimmered faintly with a silver hue. Her hair was tangled and white like faded threads of starlight. Her limbs were thin and long, almost too long, and her eyes opened slowly, revealing large, black pupils with tiny rings of color that shifted and glowed like a distant nebula. She looked up at Rain and didn't speak, just stared like a deer caught in the heat of a blast. Her chest rose and fell quickly, shallow breaths that told him she didn't have much time left. Rain should have run. He should have reported her. Everyone knew the rules. Any trace of alien life had to be turned in. That was the law. Even after the war had ended, people were still afraid. They said the aliens were dangerous. Some called them traitors, others called them monsters. But Rain didn't see a monster. He saw a child lost, broken, and dying in a trash heap left behind by a war she probably didn't even start. He reached into his pack and pulled out a small flask of water. Carefully he held it to her lips. She didn't resist. She drank slowly, weakly, but she drank. Then her eyes closed again. Not unconscious, but resting. Trusting him for reasons he couldn't explain. Rain worked quickly. He wrapped her in the thermal blanket from his shelter and carried her through the winding wreckage back to his hideout. The walk took over an hour. Her weight was nothing. She felt light as paper, but every sound made him nervous. If someone saw him, if someone followed him, it would all be over. Back at the shelter, he placed her on his cot, patched up the cuts, cleaned the dirt from her skin, and covered her with the warmest clothes he had. She didn't speak, not even a word. But her breathing slowly evened out, and her eyes stayed on him, as if watching, memorizing, learning. For the next few days, Rain barely left the shelter. He cooked basic meals, made repairs to her bandages, and watched as she began to heal faster than any human should. Her skin knit itself together with a faint glow. Her eyes adjusted to the light quickly. She sat up by the third day, though she still didn't talk. On the fifth day, Rain gave her a name. He had to call her something. He said it out loud while cleaning a broken circuit board, and looked over at her. "Leah," he said. "That sound feel okay?" She tilted her head slowly and blinked. Then she touched her chest and repeated it softly. "Leah." After that, something changed. She began to respond to his voice. She followed him with her eyes. She watched how he moved, how he worked, how he fixed things. Within a week, she was mimicking him, picking up scraps, examining wires, as if she already understood what they did. Rain knew she wasn't ordinary. Her fingers were delicate but precise. Her touch seemed to wake dead machines. One morning he found a deactivated drone floating beside her, humming softly as she touched its core. When he approached it, dropped lifeless again. Leah said nothing, but her eyes twinkled as if she knew a secret and wasn't ready to share. Rain didn't care. For the first time in years, he wasn't alone. She filled the silence with presence, with curiosity, with a quiet kind of companionship that didn't need words. He taught her to cook basic food, to scan for parts, to avoid dangerous zones. She never asked questions, but she always learned. Like, she was born to adapt. He wondered sometimes what species she came from, what war she had survived, how she ended up in that pile of twisted metal and smoke. But he never asked. Maybe he was afraid of the answer. Maybe she didn't know either. It didn't matter. Not then. To Rain, she was just Leah, a girl from the stars, found in the trash, raised like family. And deep inside, even if he didn't admit it yet, he knew something was beginning to grow. Something more than just friendship. Something that felt both terrifying and beautiful. But he kept it buried. For now, she was safe. She was home. Leah grew fast, not just in body, but in mind, like a wildfire, fed by every little spark she touched and learned from. In a matter of months, her small frame stretched into that of a teenager. Her movements became graceful, like she had been trained in another world, and her understanding of everything around her became sharper every single day. She would watch Rain as he worked fixing broken scanners or stripping old energy cores for parts, and within minutes she would be beside him, her thin fingers already helping, already solving, already finishing what he started. Rain was amazed every time, but he never said it aloud. Instead, he taught her what he knew, not like a teacher, but like an older brother sharing survival skills with someone he could trust. In the silence of their junkyard home, they built more than just machines. They built a life made of scraps and secrets. Leah didn't speak much even after learning his language, but when she did, it was with care, choosing each word like it mattered, because to her maybe it did. Some days she would sit on the rooftop of the shelter made from the curved hull of the downed fighter and stare into the sky for hours without moving, her silver hair glowing under the faint sunlight. Rain would call her in when the winds got too strong, and she would always come back without a word, but he knew something in her longed for whatever lay beyond those heavy clouds. He never asked her about the war, about where she had come from, or what had happened to her people, because she never looked back, and neither did he. The bond between them grew like vines, unnoticed at first, but always reaching, always climbing. Rain began to laugh again. Little things she did would catch him off guard, like how she once tried to cook, but ended up melting the pan, or how she made a wind chime from broken drone wings that actually sang when the storm winds blew. She made the shelter feel less like a cage and more like a home. Still, the world outside didn't stop moving, and the colony remained the same, gray and worn, full of suspicious eyes and broken trust. Rain had learned early on that secrets were safest when kept buried deep, so he kept Leah hidden as best he could. When he went into town to trade, he always went alone, telling her to stay inside and keep the door sealed, and she always listened, though sometimes when he returned, he could sense she had been watching the horizon. Again one evening, as they sat together, sorting salvaged parts from a downed drone, Leah finally spoke more than a few words. She asked, "Why am I different?" and the question hung in the air like a fragile glass thread. Rain paused, looked at her, unsure of what to say. He knew the truth, or at least part of it. She wasn't human. She wasn't from here. And maybe she wasn't even supposed to be alive. But how could he say that without breaking the small piece they had built? He took a breath and told her what he could, that he had found her half dead in the wreckage of war, and he had made a choice not to hand her over, but to raise her, to protect her, because something inside him knew she deserved a chance. She listened without blinking, and when he was done, she said, "I already knew," in a soft voice that made his heart ache. She didn't cry. She didn't ask for more. She just placed her hand gently over his and said thank you that night. Rain couldn't sleep. He stared at the ceiling, thinking about what she said, thinking about how much she had changed, how much he had changed. He had never wanted a family, not after what happened in the early days after the collapse, but now without meaning to, he had created something close. And it scared him. In the weeks that followed, Leah grew even more curious. She started fixing things before he asked her to. She would disappear for hours into the deeper salvage fields, returning with strange parts and gadgets that hummed with energy even Rain didn't understand. When he asked her where she found them, she just smiled and said, "They called to me," and he never pushed further. One day she brought back something different, a small, smooth object no larger than a fist, covered in strange markings that pulsed when touched. Rain had never seen anything like it. Leah said nothing about it, but kept it close, always within reach, and he had the feeling it meant more than she let. On the next time Rain went into town, he noticed something had changed. People were talking about strange signals, power surges, drones activating on their own. The old-timers said it was ghosts from the war. Others whispered about alien tech waking up. Rain kept his head down, made his trades, and left quickly, but he felt eyes on his back the whole way home that evening. As he walked through the salvage field toward their shelter, he saw Leah standing near the edge, staring at the sky again. He walked up beside her, and for a long moment, they said nothing. Then she turned to him and asked, "Do you think I should have been left behind like the others?" And the question struck deep into his chest. He looked at her, the way her skin caught the last light of the day, the way her eyes shimmered, not with fear, but with quiet strength. "No," he said, "you were meant to be found." And in that moment, something shifted between them, not loud or sudden, but like the way a door opens quietly after being shut for too long. It was more than care, more than protection. It was something unspoken, building silently like the storm clouds on the horizon. They went inside together, and Leah placed the strange object on the table. It pulsed once, then went still. Rain didn't ask what it was. She didn't explain. But they both knew that whatever it was the beginning of something that couldn't be hidden forever. Outside, the wind howled across the junk fields, and far above, beyond the broken clouds, something else began to stir. Days moved forward, but the silence in the skies had changed. Something unseen was now awake, and both Rain and Leah could feel it in the air, in the way old machines twitched without reason, in the way lights flickered when she passed by, in the way animals once bold in the wastelands now kept their distance from the shelter, as if sensing something unnatural nearby. Though neither of them said it aloud, Leah no longer wandered far from their shelter. Instead, she spent hours with the strange object. She had brought home its soft glow, always pulsing in rhythm with her breath, as if the two were connected in ways even she didn't fully understand. Sometimes she would sit in complete stillness for long stretches, her eyes distant and her hands hovering just above the object, while faint threads of energy wrapped around her fingers like silver mist. She never said what she was doing, but Rain didn't need to ask. He saw her growing stronger, more focused, and something inside him whispered that the time of hiding might be ending soon. Rain spent his days reinforcing the shelter, repairing old sensors, setting traps in case anyone got too curious. He had lived through enough betrayals to know that secrets didn't stay buried forever. And he had seen the way Leah was changing, not just in her abilities, but in her presence. She no longer moved like someone who was lost or unsure. Instead, there was a calm power in her steps, as if she had remembered something important, something from a past that was no longer forgotten. One evening, as the sky darkened to a deep violet and winds stirred the dust into long swirling trails, Leah finally spoke what had been building inside her. She said, "There's something out there calling to me, not with words, but with feeling. It's been waiting for a long time, and now it's getting louder." Rain looked at her carefully, watching the way her eyes shimmered with emotion, not fear, but something closer to longing. And then she asked, "Do you trust me?" He nodded without needing to think, because he had trusted her since the moment she drank water from his hands back in the ruins of the scrap field, even when he did not understand her, even when the world would have called her dangerous. His trust had never wavered, and now it was being tested in ways he had never imagined. That night, Leah placed the object in the center of the shelter and stood before it with her hands. Outstretched, the walls shook faintly as if reacting to a force. Older than anything, the colony had built a soft humming rose through the air, followed by faint pulses that made Rain's skin crawl, not with pain but with deep recognition, like hearing a song from childhood that you never remembered learning. The object cracked open, slowly revealing a swirling crystal core that sent thin beams of light into the ceiling, and Leah whispered something in a language Rain had never heard before. The beams shot into the sky and vanished beyond the clouds for a moment. Everything went quiet, then the object closed and went dark. The room felt colder, heavier, like something had shifted on a scale far beyond human understanding. Rain looked at her, but she said nothing, only turned and sat down, breathing slowly, her body faintly glowing from within. The next morning, the first ship arrived, not with noise, not with weapons, but with silence. It hovered in the distance, its shape smooth and black like obsidian, carved by wind and fire. It made no move to land, no sound to announce its presence, but it stayed in the sky, unmoving, like a sentinel watching, waiting, measuring something unseen. Rain's heart pounded when he saw it, and he knew without being told that the signal had worked, that something or someone had heard Leah's call, and now the world would never be the same again. He rushed back to the shelter and found her already standing outside, as if she had been expecting it. They stood side by side in silence, watching the ship above, and Rain whispered, "What now?" And Leah answered, "We wait. But they won't be the only ones to come, not now that the signal's been sent." She was right, because within hours the colony picked up the trace of the transmission. The military patrols that had once passed through only on occasion returned with force. They came in armored transports, scanning the skies, setting up sensor towers, and asking questions about strange readings, about alien frequencies, about unauthorized tech being used near the salvage zones. Rain stayed out of sight as much as possible, but he could feel the walls closing in. The patrols searched deeper each day. They spoke with traders and scavengers, and someone must have mentioned odd lights, strange noises, stories about a girl with glowing eyes, because by the third day, the patrols came closer than ever before. Leah remained calm even as Rain packed bags, prepared escape routes, and checked the weapons they had hidden for emergencies. She told him, "If we run, they'll follow, but if we stay, they might find us sooner." He looked at her and asked, "What do you want to do?" And her answer came without pause, "I want to stop hiding. I want to face whatever comes next." That night, they heard the sound of boots crunching on metal, the sound of drones buzzing just beyond the ridge, the sound of soldiers moving with purpose. Rain and Leah stayed low, but they both knew the moment had arrived. The door would burst open, or the walls would collapse, and the secret would be out. Rain held a makeshift blaster in his hands, eyes locked on the entrance, but before anything could happen, Leah stepped forward, her body glowing brighter than ever, the strange object pulsing in rhythm with her chest. And as the first light of dawn crept through the cracks in the wall, she whispered one more phrase in that ancient tongue. In the distance, the ship moved for the first time. A low hum vibrated through the earth, and the soldiers outside paused, unsure of what they were hearing, unsure of what they were standing on. Rain turned to Leah and saw that she was no longer just the girl he had saved. She was something more, something vast and ancient and alive in a way he had never imagined. Whatever was coming next would change everything forever. The sun had barely risen, and already the air was thick with tension, the kind that wraps around your chest and makes every breath feel heavier. Rain stood near the entrance of the shelter, weapons ready, ears, sharp eyes darting across the salvage field, waiting for the moment when the soldiers would cross the final line. But what made his hands tremble was not the fear of death or capture. It was the sight of Leah standing in front of him, calm, composed, shining with quiet power. She had not slept, her body still glowed faintly with energy drawn from the strange object that now floated midair behind her, humming gently in slow pulses. It responded to her presence like a loyal companion, each beat synchronized with her heart, though she had said little since the ship arrived. Her eyes had said everything. She was ready for what was coming, Even if rain was not, the soldiers appeared just after sunrise, their formation tight. Their faces hidden behind visors, their movements slow but determined, they moved through the wreckage like ghosts of the war that had never truly ended. And when they reached the outer wall of the shelter, they stopped, raised their weapons, and demanded entry. Rain knew this was the point of no return. He glanced at Leah one last time and whispered, "Are you sure?" She nodded once her gaze locked on the wall, as if she could already see through it. To the ones waiting outside then, without warning, the floating object flashed, and a soft wave of energy rolled across the ground, sweeping through the metal around them, lighting up every dead wire, every silent panel, every cold circuit, as if the whole junk field had suddenly remembered how to breathe. The soldiers hesitated, confused. Scanners, overloaded comms, flickered and failed. Their technology was being scrambled, and none of them understood why Rain took the chance. He activated the defense grid they had pieced together over the years using broken turrets and reprogrammed drones, and within seconds the field erupted into chaos. Metal sprang to life, old machines lifted themselves from the dirt and began firing, not to kill, but to push back, to delay, to confuse. Leia stepped outside, her body glowing brighter with each step. The soldiers shouted commands, but their weapons malfunctioned or overheated. Some fell back, others stood frozen, unsure of what to make of the being standing before them. Not human, not enemy, just something they had never prepared for. Rain followed close behind, covering her as best he could, firing when necessary, moving fast between barriers. Leah did not speak or raise a hand, but her presence alone bent the world around her. Drones changed direction, projectiles slowed in, emitter lights bent to follow her path. It was as if the entire environment obeyed her now, like she had become the heart of the forgotten machines. But then came the warning, a sharp whistle from above, as the main strike ship descended from the clouds, larger than anything they had seen before. Sleek black edges, lined with plasma cannons aimed directly at them. It hovered for a second, scanning the scene below. Then a voice echoed from the loudspeakers, cold and commanding, "Surrender the anomaly, or be eliminate." T-Drain turned to Leah, his voice tight with urgency. "We have to move, we can't fight that." But Leah didn't move. She raised her head toward the ship and closed her eyes. The floating object pulsed again, brighter now, and from it rose a soft melody, like a forgotten song sung in the language of stars. The sound reached the ship above, and for a moment it paused, hovering lower, almost curious. Then the first blast came, striking the salvage field with violent force, throwing Rain off his feet and sending fire and dust into the air. Leah remained standing, her glow now a shield around her. As energy rippled from her core, she reached toward the ship with both hands, and the object responded, opening like a flower of light. Beams of raw power shot upward, not to destroy, but to disable, to disconnect the ship from its own systems. The ship stuttered, lights flickered, engines screamed, and it tilted sideways, crashing into the far side of the field with a thunderous impact. Metal groaned, flames rose, and silence followed. Rain pulled himself from the rubble, his body bleeding but still moving. He looked around for Leia and found her kneeling near the center of the field, the object now dimmed, lying beside her. Her hands trembled, her glow fading slowly. He ran to her, dropped beside her, and held her face, gently whispering, "Stay with me. Stay awake. You did it. You stopped them." But she looked at him with tired eyes and said in a voice that cracked like broken glass, "I called them, all of them, not just the ship. Others will come. They will keep coming. Until I leave, or until they take me." Rain shook his head, refusing to hear it. "No, we can hide, we can run again together. We've survived worse, we'll survive this too." But Leah reached up and placed a hand on his chest, her fingers warm despite her exhaustion. "I was never meant to stay here. This world is not ready, not safe for what I am, but with you, I felt safe." I felt human. Tears welled in Rain's eyes, not from pain, but from the weight of her words, from the truth he had refused to face. For so long he had raised her, protected her, watched her grow into something more than anyone could have imagined, and somewhere along the way he had begun to see her as more than just family, more than just a friend. She had become his heart. She pointed to the sky where a second ship had already appeared, smaller, but faster, drawn by the signal, by the chaos. And he knew there would be no end to it, no peace as long as she remained here. Damaged ship behind them began to stir, emergency lights blinking. Escape pods unlocking, a low alarm echoing across the broken field. Leah turned to it, and then to him. This is my last chance. I can leave and lead them away. I can protect you and this place. But if I stay, they will burn everything to find Moraine. Clenched, his fists, his voice breaking. Then go save yourself. Save them. But come back one day. Come back when it's safe, when they're not hunting you anymore. Promise me. She didn't answer with words. Instead, she leaned forward and pressed her forehead. To his, a soft light passing between them, like a memory shared. Then she stood, slowly walked toward the open ramp of the broken ship, and turned one last time. He watched her go, unable to speak, unable to stop her, and as the ship lifted into the sky, disappearing through the clouds, he felt the world go quiet again, not empty but changed forever. Days after the sky burned were filled with silence heavier than anything Rain had ever known, not the silence of peace or rest, but the silence of something missing, something too large to replace and too real to forget, the kind of silence that lingers in the air, like smoke long after the fire has passed. He spent most of his time rebuilding what had been broken, though he worked slowly, as if each piece reminded him of her, of Leah, and the strange bond that had grown between them, like a fragile flower rising from metal and ruin. Junkfield was quiet. Now the soldiers had pulled back after their ship had been disabled. The officials claimed it was a systems error, a power surge, a ghost glitch from leftover war tech. No one spoke openly about the energy wave or the ship that vanished into the clouds. People in the colony pretended nothing had happened, perhaps because it was easier to pretend, or perhaps because deep down they knew something had changed, something far beyond their control. Rain never told them what really happened. He kept Leah's secret locked inside his chest where it ached, but stayed safe every night. He climbed the roof of his shelter, the same roof they had repaired together, from scraps and wires, and watched the stars for hours, not expecting her return, but hoping for a sign that she had made it, that she was still out there among the stars. Beyond the reach of fear and violence, he replayed her last words, her last look, the warmth of her touch when she had said nothing but had shown him everything. She had not just been someone he raised. She had become his family, his friend, his reason to care about a world he had long stopped believing in. And when she had gone, it felt like a part of him had gone with her. Weeks passed, then months, and slowly life in the colony returned to its old rhythm. The traders came and went, the scavengers searched the ruins, children played in the safer zones, and the sky remained quiet. But Rain remained changed. He no longer worked just to survive. Now he fixed things for others, shared what he learned, helped rebuild shelters and power lines, not because he had to, but because he wanted to carry forward something of her, something of what she gave him. Began repairing broken drones, not to sell, but to teach the local kids how to build, how to think, how to trust machines again. And he told them stories. Stories about stars and alien skies and girls, made of light, stories that always ended with hope, even when no one believed they were true. Some listened, some laughed, but a few of them believed, and in their eyes he saw the same wonder he once saw in Leah's. Then one night, as the wind moved softly through the metal bones of the field, something changed. The sky shimmered, not with fire or noise, but with a gentle ripple, like a curtain lifting. A soft hum filled the air, barely loud enough to notice, but enough to make Rain sit upright, heart pounding, eyes wide. A faint light appeared above the horizon, moving slow, steady, graceful, not like the warships of old, but like something alive, something familiar. He stood, breath caught in his throat, and watched the ship descend quiet and smooth until it landed just beyond the edge of the salvage zone, near the place where he had first found her all those years ago. The ramp opened slowly, but no soldiers stepped out, no weapons, no threats, only one figure, slender, tall, wrapped in a long dark coat, stepped into the moonlight and paused as if waiting for him to believe what he was seeing. Rain walked forward slowly, unsure of his legs, unsure of his heart, but every step felt right, felt guided by something stronger than fear. When he reached her, he saw her eyes and knew. There was no doubt it was her. She had returned not as a child, not as someone lost, but as someone who had found herself and returned by choice. She smiled and said only one word, "Rain," and it was enough to break the silence in his soul. He stepped forward and held her close, their bodies wrapped in warmth, not from light or energy, but from memory, from connection, from something no machine could measure. She had come back not because she had to, but because she chose to. Leah told him everything. In quiet moments as they walked through the fields together, how she had led the others away, how she had helped them understand that not all humans were enemies, how she had shown them the life she had lived and the one she had left behind. She spoke of peace not promised but possible, and of how she had waited for the right time to return, not to hide, but to begin again. Rain listened not with judgment, but with pride, because the girl he had once found half buried in ruin had grown into someone who could change the course of worlds, and yet still she returned to the place where it all began, not for safety, but for love, for belonging, for him. They rebuilt not just machines, but meaning. They expanded the shelter, turned it into a place of learning, a place of peace where people could come, not just to survive, but to grow. Leah shared what she knew, carefully, gently, teaching those who were ready, helping them understand that difference was not danger, that the stars above held more than fear. They held family. The sky remained wide and unknown, but now it felt welcoming, like an old story still unfolding, and Rain no longer waited for hope to return, because it stood beside him every day, silver-haired, bright-eyed, stronger than the war that tried to erase her. And in the quiet moments when the wind danced across the rooftops, they would sit together, hands touching, eyes lifted toward the stars, knowing that the path they had taken, though broken and hard, had led them to something no war could destroy, not fate, not fear, but love, and that was enough. The end.